Hello, dear UX designers and everybody in our community watching us around the world. I hope that you're great and welcome to today's episode of our deep dive series presenting the award-winning solutions of this year's UX Design Awards spring season. My name is Akar Rudolf. I'm the head of strategy at IDZ, the International Design Center Berlin, the organizer of the awards and director of the UX Design Awards. If you're watching us live on LinkedIn, please post your questions to the event chat and we'll bring them into the Q&A right after the presentation. And if you'd like to join us also live on Zoom, please hop on to our website, uxdesignawards.com, register there so you can also join the conversation live. I'm glad that you're watching today. You can join us almost every week for deep dives and talent tracks, where we present award-winning teams and designers, and of course, their award-winning work, and inspiring UX conversations with our jury members. We hope to offer you valuable insights on design processes, on new developments in our work field, and beyond that. You can find all of our events on our website, on LinkedIn, and also on YouTube. And of course, if you're working on great experiences, consider entering the awards by the end of May. And who knows, it might be your work that we'll invite to present in next fall. But today, our guests will walk us through the account tech product Intuit Tax Advisor. The Tax Advisor was recognized by the jury with a product award in this year's spring competition season. And by doing so, the jury underlined how the product actually improves skills of professional users by providing access to new areas of knowledge and enabling people to move on to strategic roles by doing so. And also how it provides benefits to clients by enabling advisors to present tax results and their advice in an understandable and transparent way. And by doing so, of course, helping the accessibility of digital solutions. I'm looking forward to hear more from two people who worked on this award-winning product from the start. Welcoming here today, I'm happy to welcome Brittany Sumarsono, who is the principal product designer, and product designer Xueyin Liu, both at Intuit in the States, over in Texas. Good morning to both of you and a warm welcome to today's deep dive. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Wonderful. It's so good to have you. And with this, I would push over to you and please start with your presentation. We're looking forward to see more about the Intuit Tax Advisor.
Sure. Thank you, okay. And let me share my screen. Awesome. Hi, everyone. We're from the Intuit Tax Advisor team. And we're really excited to be here today to do this deep dive with UXDA and share our journey with this project. So Intuit's mission is to power prosperity. And Intuit Tax Advisor, we are going to call it ITA for short. It's aimed to helping our accountants to provide advisory services more efficiently and more easily, and also help their clients to save money on tax. So in this presentation, we're going to start with a brief introduction of who we are, and then we'll talk about what problems we're trying to solve and who we're trying to solve for. I'll be demoing the solution to show you how ITA works, and then we'll dive deep into the development process. And in the end, we'll share two examples of some interesting UX obstacles we encountered and how we overcame them. So who we are, Brittany, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is Brittany. I am a product designer, and I've been in the design industry in some fashion for about 7 years. And I've worked in a variety of settings, agency, in-house, and currently I'm at Intuit, as you know, working on Intuit Tax Advisor. Over to Ari.
Thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Xueyin Liu, and I also go by Ari. I'm also a product designer at Intuit. I actually have a background in urban planning and design. I decided to switch to product design because I enjoy seeing how people love or hate my design ideas. And I'm currently working on ITA to keep improving the user experience together with Brittany. So with that, let's jump into the project itself. So what's the problem we're solving? I briefly mentioned the goal of ITA, but to make it a little bit more easier for everyone to emphasize with our user, I'm going to pretend that I am one of our end users. So let's say I am this tax firm owner, and I'm currently mainly doing tax returns for my clients. It's an important thing because the US tax is really complicated, and a lot of people need help from accountant, like professionals. While this is important, I don't want to keep doing only this. I actually have a goal that I want to increase my value to my clients by helping them to save money and provide advisory services to them. However, it's really hard for me to figure out what steps I need to take and navigate the best path to be a tax advisor, because there are no right resources or flow that I can follow to deliver a standardized advisory service that I can proudly and confidently present to my clients. And even though I might be able to do so, doing it by myself can be a manual and laborious process. So this is making me feel very frustrated because I feel like I cannot confidently increase my value, and I might be stuck doing this compliance work forever. So you can see that's a real challenge facing by the tax professionals with this market transition. And to put them out of this dilemma, that's why we came up with Intuit Tax Advisor. And now I'm going to demo the solution to you so that you can see how ITA provide or types of benefits to our customers. So I'm going to keep pretending I'm that tax firm owner, and I'm trying to start doing tax advisory. So I started using ITA and start creating a tax plan here. So I click on that button. The first step is to select a client I want to create a plan for. I already can see a list of clients' name here because the software is integrated with the tax return I'm using, with the tax return software I'm using. So I want to create a plan for Bob Sanders for 2023. And here I'm going to use 2022 tax return as the baseline. I'll select the return. And what's even better is that the software is telling me how much I can potentially save for Bob Sanders so that I know I'm choosing the right clients to work for. And I'm going to give this client a name and start planning. So the first thing I see here is that all the tax return data has been automatically imported. This is saving me tons of effort because I don't have to do the data entry myself. And while this is looking good, it's using the 2022 tax return, so it's reflecting what happened basically last year. However, Bob has told me that he knows he's going to be promoted next year. So he's actually going to have a higher wage. I want to input that information into the system. So what I can do is to, under the baseline column, to change the wage number so that I'm creating a baseline that's reflecting what Bob is going to experience. And that will make the strategy calculation more accurate. So once I'm done with all the adjustments, it seems like the next step is to check the strategies. So I'll just click on the button, and here the software is already recommending a list of strategies to me. And not only that, it's also telling me why they are recommending the strategy so that I have more information to decide whether I want to take the recommendation or not. So I just keep going through the list, and I noticed the strategy called S corporation choice of entity is a popular one, but I'm not that familiar with it. So I click on the name, and IT is teaching me what this strategy is about. And it's also reminding me of all the important requirements and limitations of the strategy. It's also providing links to important materials that I might want to refer to. It's also saving me a lot of effort because I don't have to do the research myself. And I feel like with using ITA, I can not only create a plan more efficiently, but I can also improve my knowledge in the tax advisory field along the way. So after learning about the strategy, I think this could be a good one for Bob. So I'll just click on the add button and add a strategy to the workplace. I'll give it some required number and the saving is automatically calculated. So I'm going to just add a little bit more strategies that I think are suitable for Bob, like hire kids or reimbursement plan. I can also easily make change to the strategy change amount. And when I'm doing that, the tax savings are calculated in real time. But sometimes I might be wondering what's behind this number, like how we got this number. You can see there are formula buttons below each number. So when I click on that, it explains to me how this number is calculated. And for some more complicated strategies, I can check the detail lines below it. So I can see how all the individual line items, like the numbers, added up to the final number. I can also check the details of each line item so that I understand what's going on here, like what's the rationale behind this strategy. And after checking all of that, I feel confident presenting this to my clients because I can verify the accuracy behind the calculation and I understand how the strategy works. So now I feel good about the strategies. The next step seems to be to review the plan. Here I can see how the strategies I've added is impacting the 2023 projection, basically how it's going to look like in 2023 tax return. I can see that with the strategies I've added, I have decreased Bob's taxable income by $2,477. I can also see how the strategies are impacting the activities they are attaching to. And if I want, I can also toggle on and off the strategy to see how it's affecting the overall tax liability. So this is looking good, and I'm excited to jump into the final step, client report. So when I come to this page, everything is already there for me. It's automatically generated with pages like what's in the plan, disclaimer, year-over-year comparison. So my clients will have like a, they can see the full picture of how their tax situation was like in 2022 and how much they're going to save in 2023 and how much they're going to pay as well, so that they can be prepared for that. And we'll show them top tax saving strategies. And if they want, they can also check the details of each strategies so that they understand what we're suggesting for them, and also a step-by-step guidance on how to get started implementing the strategy. So this is saving me back and forth communications with my clients by providing all those informations upfront. However, with Bob, I know Bob doesn't have a lot of tax knowledge. I want to make it even easier for him to read. So I can just click on the edit button and customize the strategy details and client actions based on Bob's preference. So now I'm good with the content. The last thing I want to do is that I want to style the report a little bit more so that it aligns with my firm branding. So I click on the report settings. It allows me to import a logo into the report. I can also switch between different color schemes, so it aligns better with my firm style. Everything's looking good. I'm excited to download it and share with Bob. So it will be downloaded as PDF that I can just email to Bob easily. So that's how Intuit Tax Advisor work. You can see how it's helping the tax professionals to follow this flow for them to get started providing tax advisory service. So they just create a baseline and then check the strategies, adjust the strategy amount, review the plan, and give the client report to their clients. And IT is also automating a lot of steps for them. For example, by doing the calculation, doing the data import, and generate the client report. And also it's providing the necessary resources for the end users to keep improving their knowledge in the tax field so that they can become a better advisor along the way. And that's the demo. So next, I'm going to hand it over to Brittany to share more details on the development process to see how we got there.
All right, thanks, Ari. Yeah, so you might be wondering how we ended up with this product, and I'll take us back to the beginning real quick and yeah, tell you all how we got here. So really the first step was our business had declared advisory to be of strategic interest, and we knew it was a big problem for our customers, but we didn't know exactly what to do. So a starting place was a jobs to be done survey that we had done for our business unit to figure out what are the jobs to be done for an accountant and what opportunity areas are there to help improve some of those jobs or tasks that they might not be able to do as well right now in some of our products. So next slide. Here's a list of a few of them. I won't go through all of them, but there were a lot of areas that related to tax advisory that we identified that we figured we could go about solving. And again, this survey was conducted for us by an outside agency and using the jobs to be done framework, and was done with about 1,000 accountants. So we felt pretty good about the results. Next slide. However, of course, as designers and product people, we wanted to gain empathy and not just rely on broad surveys. So we decided to interview 6 of our internal tax experts to discover their pain points and learn about their experience and what barriers they encounter transitioning to advisory. And a quick note here is that we did want to interview external accountants, but this project started in March of 2020. So we had a lot of great plans that were interrupted and we had to pivot pretty quickly. So some of the pain points that we discovered were around accountants knowing what actions were going to occur in a client's life, really a lot about needing to know their clients better and how to communicate to them better so that they're not surprised by things like tax due or being charged for advice, things like this. So really improving that relationship between the accountant and their client. And next slide. So we also wanted to work backwards from an ideal solution. So we developed an ideal statement, as we often do at Intuit. So in a perfect world, these tax advisors would be able to easily pick strategies, know about events in their client's life before they happen and not after, and be able to do this all from one place so that their clients would come back for more and they would be able to charge the appropriate rate while giving proactive tax advice. And ultimately, the feeling we wanted to give them was the feeling of empowerment in their jobs and satisfaction, knowing that they're actually helping customers and not churning through forms and not making a difference in their clients' lives at the end of the day. And so here's kind of an image of that. We plotted a lot of these problems along the advisory workflow, which we had some of our internal accountants help us define that workflow. We put some problems down. And then next we brainstormed some solutions and picked the ones that we thought would have the biggest impact. And then we decided to start from the end and work backwards. So we knew that the end was an ideal output for the client. So starting with the client deliverable and working backwards to the inputs that would be needed for the accountant to generate that. And so then our next step, of course, was testing and prototyping. So we put together a couple of prototypes and put them in front of 6 tax experts and 8 taxpayers, which sometimes we say taxpayer, client, it's the same thing. Next slide. And so here we have some quotes from our tax experts and clients. So this was really our first research dive into talking with the end taxpayer. And so they expressed some needs around wanting their accountant to be more proactive and reach out to them to help give them advice to make their lives better. So here is just a quick visual of some of the prototypes we tested. They were just really, they don't look scrappy, but they were, because they're very just high level concepts. Like all the features in there were just used to test out ideas. And we knew that we probably wouldn't end up building this exact thing at the end of the day, but it helped us get good feedback from customers. And at the end of the day, 100% of people we test with like the idea or the concept of tax advisory. So we knew that we were onto something and that this was a need on both sides of the marketplace. But what was left was to determine exactly how we would deliver that. And so here's again some detailed findings from the clients. A lot of them blindly trust their tax advisors until something goes wrong. Most of the time it was just an annual transaction rather than a relationship. And a lot of the theme of this project is around moving from transactional to relational. And there's a few more listed here around that proactive piece as well. But these are some of the things clients had told us. And then once we moved from testing with users, we decided to test the market. And this was really because our leadership, while interested in what we had shown them, wasn't yet convinced that we really had a there, which is a term we use at Intuit sometimes to mean, is there really something tangible behind this research? Can we actually make this into a real product? So we decided to validate the market. And the way we did that was through a very scrappy test because we were still a team of 4 or so. We didn't have a lot of resources or access to marketing dollars. So we just stood up a quick landing page using a website builder, put out a notification to some customers, collected some leads, and we pretty much stitched this all together using tools like Calendly and MailChimp and created really a sales funnel, a small one, just to get people into a fake sales call with one of our representatives who then would pitch the product to them, ask if they were interested in purchasing today. And if they said that they were interested in having their card on file charged, we would record that as a success measure, but then ultimately tell them, thank you for being willing to purchase. We actually don't have the product ready today, but we'll let you know when it is ready. So this was just a way for us to get real customer feedback on the fact that they were interested in buying a product like this. So next slide. So our goal for the landing page conversion rate was 10%, and our goal for those who ended up all the way talking to a sales rep was 5%. So we hope that 5% of those who talked to a sales rep ended up deciding to purchase that same day. And we ended up blowing both of those results out of the water, which was a big surprise to our team. Our landing page conversion rate was around 17%, which beat our goal of 10%. And then our rate of sales closed was 13%, which beat our goal of 5% by over double. So we took this as a very strong indicator that we were on the right path. And we learned some new information about who might be early adopters of our product. Here's a couple of them listed here. They had business clients. They were already charging for tax planning in some capacity, and they weren't happy with client reports, just as a few of those. So we knew what they were looking for. And then quickly after that, we moved into trying to get a real solution developed. So we finally got some dollars to make this thing real. We built a less than MVP version. We wanted to build a true MVP, but weren't able to get quite there. So we decided to launch this less than minimum viable product as a test. And so we ended up getting 10 users access to the product for 1 week to see if they'd be confident enough to share the results with their client. And unfortunately for us, the test was a complete failure because we could have guessed it was going to be because it was less than minimally viable. But it gave us the data that we needed to push for a better solution. Because ultimately accountants needed more strategies, more abilities to make adjustments, and more clarity regarding calculations. So it was a failure, but we learned a lot. And so we decided to stop the test early, and our net promoter score at that point was very negative. So it meant we had more people not liking our product than liking it. But then when we pivoted and decided to put some designs with improvements in front of them, that result went up to a positive 40, which means more people liked it than didn't like it, which is ultimately our goal. So again, this was just a Figma prototype, so we needed to translate that into the real product. And then after a lot of improvements, we relaunched, and Intuit Tax Advisor launched in August 2022, and we're still working towards making it better and the best it can be. Over to you, Ari.
Yeah, thanks, Brittany. So that was the journey, and as Brittany said, we're still working on this project. And in the process, we've encountered a lot of interesting UX issues. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of the obstacles we overcame. The first one is to try to improve multi-line strategies, and I'm going to explain what it is later on. So it's about trying to strike a balance between keeping the software simple, but also make it feels reliable to the client, to the customers. So a little bit background on that. One of our product principles for ITA from the very beginning was to keep things simple. We want to allow advisors to deliver the most impact with the least amount of input possible. So at that time, all the strategies were just this one-line strategy, and with only one input for strategy change. And you can easily do this horizontal math to see how everything like fit across. However, we soon encountered strategies that were too complex to follow that one line and one input rule. And the first example is called S corporation entity choice of entity, which I had showed in the demo. It's one of the most popular tax strategies among accountants, but it's super, super complicated. So even when we expand the strategy to 3 lines, our pros still feel like it wasn't reliable, that they can't understand what's going on here. And they were saying something as big as this, it just cannot be that simple. So we tested out that S-Corp strategy together with other complex strategies to see what it would take to get a minimal viable framework so that users understand and trust the strategies. And we found that users want to see all the numbers affected by their input, not just a select few. Only by doing so, they will trust us. And users want to see something that fit their current mental model, that more closely follow the tax forms they're used to seeing, so that they can spend the least effort in understanding what we're presenting here. So based on that, this is how S corporation strategy looks today. It looks complicated because we added more lines, all the important necessary numbers, but we're still trying to keep it simple by like color coding the numbers so users understand which line is helping or which line is hurting the final tax saving number. And we're also trying to group it by the rationale of like how the strategy works. So at the first sight, it's easier for users to understand and to follow the logic that we are presenting here. So even though we added more lines, it looks more complicated, but by doing so, we are still keeping it simple. And now when we were testing the S-Corp strategies, all the users were able to figure out how the strategy works by themselves without extra help. So that's the first example. And another one is about to decide which strategies should be applicable. And it's about finding that sweet spot between flexibility and accuracy. So ITA actually filters out inapplicable strategies like this one by the imported tax return data parameters and the government rules on the strategies. And those inapplicable strategies cannot be added so that we can make sure the user stays compliant with the government rules. However, we were getting a lot of complaints from users, and they were saying that majority of the strategies cannot be added, and they can't figure out what to do to adjust to be able to add those strategies. And they were saying that ITA is not flexible enough for them to do the projection that they want to do. So we conducted semi-structured interviews and also workshop sessions with our users, basically just to give them some examples of the strategies and ask them when do they think the strategy should be applicable. So that together we redefined what should be the applicability rule for those strategies. Some findings here. So users think that the way we use the baseline, the tax return baseline as the parameter to decide on the applicability does not make that much sense because The baseline only reflects what is true right now, not what might be true. And they're projecting for the future, so we should consider that possibility while deciding on the applicabilities. Therefore, users are saying that they still want to see all the rules, but we should be able to ignore some of the rules because they know what's in their control, but the system doesn't know. Like they know this event is possible to happen next year for their clients, but the system doesn't know, and the system is filtering out the strategy based on that. So it's causing trouble for them and making the software less flexible when doing the projections. So based on that, we decided to loosen the requirements so that we can allow for what might happen. So principally, if it's something that's possible to happen within the projected year, the strategies related to that event should be allowed. But we still need to remind users of all the rules, and by doing so, by loosening the requirements, most of the strategies now are applicable. For those few strategies that are not applicable, we make sure that we give users clear guidance step by step so that they know where to go, what to adjust to activate this strategy. And that's all that we want to share today. We're still working on ITA. We're doing a lot of rapid experiments to explore user needs we haven't covered yet. And we're just keep trying to make this software more efficient for users. And thank you for listening. I will give it back to Akil.
Well, thanks a lot for this to both of you. And I guess you already succeeded in quite a big achievement, namely making a major pain point, which is tax returns, a little bit more usable, at least for professionals. And now most of us maybe know the situations from the client perspective. So this is also interesting maybe to know what you also did on that side. This said, if you're watching on LinkedIn again, push your questions to the chat and we'll bring them in. And if you're on Zoom right now, you can always turn on your camera and just ask your questions straight away. But let me ask you a question now. I understand also from your research work that one of the keys when you started to test ITA was to actually present like the final step of the product to advisors to test whether they like it or not, which was actually generating the report for clients. Was that correct? Because I think you didn't show that. It was a lot about creating clarity and transparency and also transporting the value of advisory towards clients. Can you say a few words about this?
Yeah, I think we didn't, we had one slide, but it wasn't very detailed in terms of the report itself. But we did have outside of the presentation more detailed prototypes of, actually it was the original concept was going to be a mobile app or some sort of mobile experience for clients to look at a really nice presentation of their tax savings. And we didn't show it as much in this presentation, but that's what we put in front of clients way back in the very beginning. Due to some constraints, we ended up going with a PDF first as the minimum option for clients rather than a mobile app, which is maybe a bit ambitious, but it's okay to be ambitious in the beginning and then have it scaled back. But we are going to look to do even now more testing. We've focused a lot on the accountant to get the product out since they're the main purchasers since we first started, but we have a lot more work to do with the clients to get to a more ideal experience for them.
Yeah, because one of the goals that we want to achieve is to form that continuous trustful relationship between clients and accountants. So for us, like how to define this as a success for the accountants to use our software is that their clients is satisfied with the final deliverables. So the rationale is we start with that final deliverable and work backwards to see what data we need from accountants and then what calculation we need to do to get to that point.
So what does this approach of testing the final result actually teach you and told you? And could you say, is this a process that you would only use in selected cases, or in which not?
I can take a stab at that. So I think it's always good to work backwards in a way from the ideal solution into what it takes to get there. So I would say that's something that you can apply to any UX project, is start with the ideal and work backwards, no matter if it's a two-sided market, kind of like we have, or even if it's one-sided, the working backwards from the ideal is always good. I think one thing that we learned is that accountants don't always understand what their end users want. So sometimes it can be tempting with research to just start with the end user that you're designing for, listen to what they say and what they say their clients need. But it is helpful to go directly to the clients themselves and realize what gaps might be there, since part of the problem we were solving for is developing that better relationship, as we were saying, between the accountant and the client. And sometimes it takes a researcher or someone with a UX background to go and bridge that gap and figure out actually what problems the client is having directly from their mouth. So that's one thing I would say to that.
So it was both a learning for you, or let's say it was a design proposal in terms of what could be the best outcome, and using that was also in a way to teach empathy towards your potential clients, the accountants, right? So did you take out items from there in order to take you towards a design system when you started designing ITA?
Sorry, could you repeat the question one more time? Or
So actually, there was a question from our audience, from Shadi Dubai, who's a design manager at Sago, if there was a design system that you followed and developed for ITA.
I see.
Yeah, I think for ITA, most of the part we're trying to utilize the existing Intuit design system. If they're asking about like the UI style and the component stuff, most of the part we're using that. But what's interesting is that for the client report, we're trying to not to use that, because we don't want, like, when our customer presenting this report to the clients, they feel like it's a work done by Intuit instead of their accountants. So we want to help the accountants to promote their branding, their firm. So we're trying to avoid using something that looks too similar to Intuit style. Therefore, we came up with like a separate design library or design system for client report. And also, we're trying to take into consideration of like scalability. In the future, if we're going to allow them to change the font, change the colors, and do all the customization by themselves. And I think that's also feedback from the users. They said like they wanted to align with their firm branding. So that's why we decided it's important to keep it separate from Intuit Design Library.
Well, I guess in terms of the ITA as a application, you developed a design system, especially, which will be important when you keep scaling it and developing, right? I'm wondering, I mean, there was also a note from the audience about the complexity and the amount of information that is shown in the UI that you showed during your presentation. And I understand that it was something that you tried to avoid, and you made it extremely simple at the beginning, only presenting the predictions, and you added more complexity, more information based on your users' feedback, who needed to look beyond the surface and understand how the predictions were being calculated, needed more ability to add their own information, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering if you developed a measurement, or how did you evaluate how to balance the mass of information, the complexity, with clarity? Is there some ideas on that you can share?
Yeah, that's a good question in terms of the measurement. I feel like even with that example, we're still tweaking some of the things in that design, even that we showed to make it clearer, because that's still a question we're trying to answer. But I will say this is where it's always really important, as always, to understand your end user, because while it looks more complex to us, it's actually clearer to them. So it's kind of one of those things where even though the first one looked clear, it was more complicated to the accountant because there were a lot of things hidden from their view. And what we've learned about our customers is they love to see everything. If they could see every number, they would. And it's almost like reading a book where you and I might like the summary, but they want to see every chapter. Otherwise, they won't understand the story that it's telling. And that's really kind of the theme with that strategy, is seeing the numbers paints a story for them that they can then follow. And so we're still striking the balance with that in terms of not doing too much, but just enough. But I think that what is just enough is always an open question for us when we approach any new design challenge within Intuit Tax Advisor. And I think we're still learning through that.
Yeah, but I do think we have a metric to measure that. I don't know if we can share the number, but one of our goals is to allow users to be able to create a plan within certain period of time. So we have a metric for that. I feel like looking at that number to see how much time they spend in ITA is a way to tell whether it is too complicated for them, whether it's overwhelming them.
Yes, and I guess you also shared how important it is to directly work with users when you talked about their wish to add additional strategies, additional components, et cetera, et cetera. And this is like you would never be able to measure this from data analysis alone, only from direct feedbacks, right? There is a question from Dana Montenegro that I would love to throw in, because I think it's quite interesting about the context of the project. And she asked whether you can explain a little bit about how you work with internal stakeholders and project sponsors within Intuit. Did you include them in workshops, in interviews, include them often or infrequently? Or did they just get summaries and interviews from you? And maybe explain who the stakeholders were in this case.
Yeah, I think one of the important lessons I learned myself is to include them in the user sessions. So our stakeholders has like, oh, sorry, my desk has like tax content team who are like knows a lot of knowledge on tax, and the engineering team, and they know all the limitations, and sometimes also sales team and customer support, because I'm working on first-time user experience. So we want to make sure the whole first-time user experience is like consistent across different channels. So I think including all the stakeholders in user sessions is very important, especially on topic that's really complicated. So sometimes even we bring back the findings, there will be even more questions raised in the team because people have different interpretations on what the user said. So if they are there, they can just ask a question in the real time. That would be more time saving. And also it's easier for people to form empathy with our end user, because some of our stakeholders, they're super passionate about the software and they do have a great vision on how it should be. But sometimes maybe it doesn't like align best with who we are trying to serve right now. So if they can't directly hear from the user, it's easier for them to understand the decision we make.
Yeah, and to that, I'll add from the very beginning, we had laid out user research principles that we didn't want to overwhelm the user with too many faces in a session. But one way to accommodate that was to have representatives from each function. So it was always expected that a representative from product development could be there, marketing, sales, customer success. And so at least having one from each function invited was our goal. It didn't always work out where everyone could join every user session, but the invite was always there. And Intuit as a whole has a culture of being very inclusive and wanting to work things out end to end. And so in order to do that, we have to include every function to deliver the best experience.
So that sounds very sensible to get most stakeholders on board in very early stages and in user research. How did you then design the next steps? Did you keep the same stakeholders on your design development stage processes? How did you involve them there in the next phases?
Yeah,
I can take I'll take a stab at it. I'd say we've always had our kind of normal sprint operating mechanisms where we regularly meet with developers and review designs. I will say that as the team has grown, that has become more of a challenge. We've went from 4 to 10 to I don't even know how many people are on the team anymore. So that's something we're actively figuring out, is how do we keep the same people along the journey from the beginning of a feature idea all the way to it being delivered.
There is a question from Deborah, and I find it very interesting because it's very personal, actually. And she writes that she researches a lot and works a lot with users, and but she struggles with documenting experiences, especially those that are intuitive, which I would say she means not quantitative, but qualitative. So how do you document your thinking process, is her question, in order to structure and not to lose inputs that you gain in maybe testings, interviews, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically in the testing, I guess that's also why we need to have a lot of stakeholders in the testing, because we can have more brain cells to understand users' needs. And we usually document summarize and document the findings into a deck, which we not only add the findings, but also quotes from the users and sometimes timestamps of the recording that we can refer back to. So that's how we document the qualitative side. And I think it's important to share the findings as well as the final decisions with the team, because you're right, it's hard sometimes to remember how we got there. So if more people know that, they will help me to remember that later on. And another thing we're doing is we have this user opinion sharing meeting, in which we share what we heard from users with all the stakeholders, different teams like CS, sales, engineering, and text content. So everyone hears what we heard from the users. And in that meeting, we just go through the user feedback, and we also categorize them together to make sure we understand them in the same way. And we can also visualize them into charts so that we can also analyze it quantitatively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I'll add that within design at Intuit as a whole, we're getting better about documenting within our own Figma files, because that can always be a challenge when you take over someone else's design work. And one thing that's really helped is a common framework across all of Intuit design, where within our own files, we lay out the customer problem statement, the ideal state, the hypothesis, and the success metrics that we're driving forward, so that anyone looking at a design knows what it was trying to solve, who it was trying to solve for. And so documentation is always a problem everywhere I've ever worked, but it's something that's continually being iterated on. And I feel like we're always getting better at it.
Yes, I think some kind of standardization and a referral system in terms of how do you structure information is really, really important. And good to hear that you're working on it. Also, good to hear that you're still struggling with this, because you're not alone out there. So this is something that everybody is, I think, struggling with, because there's a great deal of information being generated in these processes. And are there, apart from Figma, any tools that you really prefer?
We're a big fan of Google Sheets.
Yeah.
Yeah, like working on a tax app that spreadsheets is probably also something that you see a lot. But of course, they're practical and you can link information to them. Pei Liu, who is also here on Zoom, wrote or asked if there were any constraints at the beginning of the project, because you said it was quite an open project, blue ocean trial. Can you talk us through about constraints, if any?
Yeah. Well, I think at the very beginning, and I kind of Ari speak to some of the constraints later, but in the very beginning, the constraint was really that we weren't really a formal project or discovery team. It was just 4 of us kind of out there still doing some of our day job work, but being told, oh, go discover some things. And so the constraint, I guess, was resources and time. And in some ways it was a constraint. In some ways it was a lot of freedom, because when you don't have a lot of resources attached to what you're doing, people are less concerned with, you wasting resources. And so we were kind of free to experiment and explore without much constraint in the beginning. But I'd say in general, in life and in companies, as more resources come on board, it's a double-edged sword of like you now are able to do the things that you want to do, but then it comes with more expectations. So some of the constraints were, I guess, lack of resources, but that also was kind of helpful when it allowed us to be scrappy very early on.
Can you say a little bit about the timings? I mean, how long was your, let's say, the scrappy, quick and dirty, do-it-yourself phase, and how long was the more elaborate phase when you started to develop with a company on your back, but also supporting you?
I want to say it was like a quarter, like a few months, 3 or so months of discovery, maybe a bit more than that, before we brought a formal business case forward to the leadership of, okay, we've done this discovery initiative. Now, in order to move any farther forward, this is what we would need to make that happen. And then, of course, leadership has to go deliberate on their own and come back with what's needed to get that done by less than a year, 3 to 6 months, if I'm remembering correctly.
And that was until which stage? In 3 months, and then you had the pre-MVP, or what was the result by then?
The real last thing before resources, before we could get especially development resource, because we didn't have any at that time, was that market validation test. That was the big, we had prototypes, and then we had that market validation test of there's a there. What are we going to do next?
That was the fake door test, when you pushed out a landing page and saw whether you could gain any actual leads and interest out there.
Exactly, yes.
And that's also very valuable, or like impossible the other way around, without any core numbers to show, to argue for more resources to be added to the project. Mm-hmm. One last thing. I'm wondering about the machine learning part and the predictive part, because I sense this is like a core USP of the product, that actually based on numbers, maybe tax returns and company numbers from a client. The system can actually predict diverse strategies on tax savings. I think it's a minimum of 30 that you developed. So how are they generated? Which data sources are being used by the algorithm? Can you tell us a little bit about this, and how long did it take to train the system?
I don't have details on that, but I feel like because we have also data from the other tax software at Intuit, so I think the team is utilizing that as well. But as you said, along the way, when more users start using ITA, we'll have more data on their behavior patterns, like which strategy they use for which type of clients, and that all will contribute to the model along the way.
Yeah, we have exactly what Ari said. We're using tax data for now, which is automatically imported, and we're still on the journey of incorporating other sources and building more data on top of that to learn and generate better recommendations and all of that in the future.
To wrap it up, I'm wondering what winning the award meant to you, and did it change anything for you, for the team, for the product within the company, or on the market?
We are excited about that for sure. And yeah, we did receive that award panel, and we're putting it in the office. But I think we still know like there are a lot of opportunities for us to like discover and uncover. So this is like definitely not the end. It's like we just launched a little bit more than MVP version. So there are a lot of areas for us to like keep working on in the future. So yeah, the team may just still keep working on that, but we appreciate that we got the recognition. That's definitely motivating to us.
Yeah, our business unit within Intuit is very excited, and it's been shared to the Intuit design community at large. And so, yeah, everyone was very happy. And yeah, as Ari was saying, it was motivating, I think. It can be tough working on a new product, and sometimes you feel like you're just making little changes and you're not sure where you're heading some days. And so it's nice to have a little occasion to celebrate.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that is given by experts. So it's really strengthens you also within the company, and we very much hope that the motivation will keep on, and we're looking forward to hear what the next steps will be with ITA. And as you said, you're just at the beginning of a long journey. So dear Brittany and Xueyin, thank you very much for your presentation and insights. It was a pleasure to talk to you and to learn a little bit more about this accomplished product, and lots of success for the next steps.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So thanks to everybody who watched us today. If you missed anything, just hop on back to LinkedIn or to our website, and you'll see the recording of the entire presentation and talk. And please join us again next week if you have some time for our UX conversation with jury member Oliver Kulpi. Exactly in 1 week, he'll be talking about customer experience, about building awareness, and how to keep a flexible mindset within a thriving and very dynamic design field. And on May 3rd, we will welcome Deacon International for the next deep dive with their award-winning product, the adaptive scheduling solution for actually planning patient transport. So there's 2 exciting events coming up with much more to come. You can register on LinkedIn and our website, as said before, uxdesignawards.com, and there you can also learn more about the awards and the open call for participation. So mark your calendars and have a great day wherever you are, and see you very soon. Bye-bye.